this is hard because we really have to work all over the globe to say that this is not a tool that governments should use, that human beings are not bargaining chips and should not be unjustly detained in these ways and used in these ways.
The Iranian nuclear program is one of the most serious threats to U.S. national security and to our interests in the Middle East. Thanks to sanctions and a firm and united position from the The ultimate solution here is a way for Palestinians to live in peace and dignity, and for Israel to be assured of security. There were steps taken along the way around normalization with Arab partners in the region. There's more to go in that arena, but I don't think anything's going to proceed forward unless there's a future for the Palestinians.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on Washington Post Live. I'm Shane Harris. I cover intelligence and national security here at the Washington Post. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Ambassador Wendy Sherman, most recently the Deputy Secretary of State, a veteran, a diplomat who has been involved, as you saw in our intro, in key issues that are absolutely at the forefront of global affairs right now. So, Ambassador Sherman, welcome back to Washington Post Live. Thanks for being here.
Great to be with you, Shane, and to talk with all your viewers.
Yeah. So let's get right into it with the story that everyone is, I think, watching right now, really kind of unfolding hour by hour, and that's the situation in Israel and the broader Middle East, specifically with Lebanon and Iran. You know, your colleagues at the State Department right now are engaged in very high stakes effort to try and find some diplomatic off-ramp to the potential for a much broader war igniting, whether it be between Hezbollah and Israel or Iran and its proxy forces. I'd love to just start with your observations on where we are in this moment and what are you seeing as the prospects for some kind of diplomatic solution that prevents a wider conflict?
There's no doubt we're at a very difficult moment um, because of the assassination of Haniyeh in Tehran, right during the inauguration, excuse me, of Iran's new president, which is a humiliation of the government of Iran and also undermines all of their security. Iran feels it must respond. Likewise, there has been loss of leadership in Lebanon, and Hezbollah believes that it needs to attack as well. And Hamas, of course, feels that the ongoing war by Israel in retaliation and in ensuring their security by Israel after the horrific attack on October 7th, where over 1,200 Israelis were killed in brutally and horrifying terrorist ways, that in fact Hamas wants to keep going. And we've seen a really difficult moment in yesterday. Sinwar, who has been the leader in the underground networks of Gaza, really the decision maker around the ceasefire, was named to replace Haniyeh, which means that Sinwar is now really in charge of everything that is going on and everything that is decided, which probably means that the ceasefire is going to be even tougher. The ceasefire is the only sure way that there is a future for the Palestinians and that Israel's security is assured, which is, of course, our number one priority. And of course, getting the hostages returned. There are American hostages that are among those that are being held in Gaza. So we're at a very tough moment. We are waiting to see whether the retaliation, the response will be measured, well calibrated, to reestablish deterrence on all sides. Now, President Biden spoke to the leaders of Qatar and Egypt yesterday, trying to get them to push for the ceasefire, which would help with a stand down from a wider war. I don't believe that Israel wants a regional war. I don't believe Lebanon wants a regional war. I don't believe Yemen wants a regional war. Syria, I don't believe Iran wants a regional war. But calibrating the response in a way that doesn't lead to that regional war, we haven't seen such a great way forward in that regard. But I'm hopeful that the president's diplomacy, Secretary Blinken's endless diplomacy, will in fact get us to the right place. But we're all on a knife's edge at the moment. There's no doubt about that, Shane.
Absolutely. And I think viewers will remember going back to April when, of course, there was that barrage of missile and drone strikes from Iran into Israel in response to an attack that Israel had carried out. And that kind of struck people as something that maybe was calibrated. Also, a very good example of regional cooperation by the United States and notably Arab governments, along with Israel, to defend against that attack. As you're thinking about what a calibrated response might look like, should we be thinking about those events in April as kind of a model where there's going to be a lot of show of force, but hopefully not a huge loss of life that then gets contained and we sort of reset things back to status quo where they are now?
Well, I think that's what everybody is hoping for, is that it will be similar to April 13th. General Kurilla has been in Israel, and I'm sure in touch with other militaries in the region. But things have gotten tenser, and there have been greater deaths of Palestinians, of concerns by Israelis. Many people have been displaced along the border with Lebanon on both sides of that border. So we're in a much more difficult situation. But certainly a reprise of April 13th would be the best thing to look forward to here. But I'm not sure that everybody feels like they want to come together in the way they did. Now, we saw the foreign minister of Jordan go to Tehran. That hasn't happened in a very long time. That was an effort to try to have Iran be very thoughtful about what it does here. Whether any of these very intense diplomatic efforts, and really am grateful for everyone's efforts in this regard, will have the desired effect, I think remains to be seen. And so we have to be ready, help Israel be ready. We, of course, will help Israel to defend itself. We have sent troops and all kinds of assets to the region to be ready because, of course, American forces are also at risk here. There are American forces in Iraq, which may be at risk, and in other places in the region. And so this is a very risky situation where people, I think, do want to do this in a measured way. I certainly hope so. But an errant missile, a precision guided missile from Lebanon, which doesn't quite get where it's supposed to, could create a wider regional war in a moment.
And of course, we're all bracing for some response from Hezbollah, Iran, proxies in Iraq, maybe the Houthis, maybe a combination of all of those. But I want to ask you also about the risk of an Israeli preemptive response, we might say. They might not see it as preemptive with regards to Lebanon. I mean, I've been to the region now twice this year, and the North has seemed like this war that to many people in Israel felt inevitable. So many people displaced in the north of the country, as you just noted. They cannot go back to their homes. Is it only a matter of time before Israel feels it has to escalate the situation with Hezbollah there in Lebanon to be able to bring people back? And how is that factoring into this kind of cauldron right now?
The real key to all of this, Shane, is a ceasefire. Because if there is a ceasefire in the war with Hamas in Gaza, then everyone has reason to stand down and to get the hostages returned to Israel, to America, to other countries, to ensure that Israel's security is secure for the long term, to have the Palestinians understand that there is a future, there is a possibility of a two-state solution or some version of that where they can live in peace and dignity, that the suffering of the Palestinian people can come to a close. But in all of that, that Israel is secure and knows that it will be for the future. There was an effort, of course, for Arab nations to normalize with Israel. And there was a tremendous opportunity for Saudi Arabia to normalize with Israel. And an enormous amount of work went into that. I think all of that is on hold for now until we get to the ceasefire, until we get to a calmer place in the region where, in fact, we can see a way forward here for the Palestinian people and to ensure Israel's security, which is absolutely fundamental.
I want to bring in an audience question here from Scott in California. He asks, are you worried at all that some in the Israeli government may be hoping for a wider war, either because they really want one or because they believe it serves their personal political interests? What do you think about that?
I certainly hope that's not the case. Uh, you know, it's very hard to understand another country's security needs and what it is trying to do. I am an enormous supporter of Israel and always have been. I haven't always agreed with how Israel has proceeded on a given policy or way forward. I wish personally that the prime minister and the security cabinet had found their way to a ceasefire already. I think it's absolutely crucial. It is, as I said, the key to a secure Israel and to a future for the Palestinian people and to everybody's suffering. And of course, the return of all the hostages. So I certainly hope that people, leaders in Israel, are not looking at this as a political play. I don't think they are. There's way too much at stake for the Israeli people and for the future of any Israeli politician. I hope that they are focused on peace. And the United States can't dictate to Israel what to do or how to do it, but Israel does depend on the United States to support them, which we do. And so I hope that Israel, at least its leaders, take a moment and understand what is at risk here, not only for them, but for their ally, the United States, for others in the region who are supporting them, who were there for them on April 13th, and calibrate how they proceed here, just as we are working hard to get others to calibrate any response they may make.
I want to pivot now to the historic prisoner swap that we saw last week. And of course, you have been deeply involved in these kinds of negotiations and know them very well. Huge for its size. I mean, 24 people exchanged from multiple countries. Of course, notably, a number of American journalists were freed in that. I want to go first to an audience question here from Henry in Illinois, because it really gets at sort of one of the things that's central to this particular deal. He notes that one commentator said he thought that Vladimir Putin got just what he wanted out of this prisoner exchange. His number one ace assassin, there he's referring to this man, Vadim Karamazov, who was this assassin that was free, Krasakov, sorry, who was held in Germany. And who was a kind of linchpin to this prisoner exchange. I'm curious if you agree that Putin got exactly what he wants, and the reader wants to know, could that come back to haunt the United States?
All of these trades are very tough. And I certainly understand when people say, how could we do such a thing? How could we take a murderer like Reznikov and working with Germany, Chancellor Scholz made a very courageous decision. Working with Slovenia and Norway and Poland, and of course, negotiating with the Russians. How could we do these kind of things? But we do have a responsibility to bring Americans home. And I think that this trade was an appropriate one, although a very difficult one for all of the leaders to make. And in fact, some of these countries got nothing in return. They freed Russian prisoners and got nothing back, which says something about the incredible work that President Biden, Vice President Harris have done to create these friendships, these alliances, these partners who are willing to do something with us and for us without necessarily getting anything in return. So this is very tough. Now, one thing that I will say to the questioner, we're trying to do everything we can to create a norm that people shouldn't do these kind of things. And one of the things that happened when I was deputy is we created a new designation on travel advisories, a D designation, not for deputy secretary, but for detainees. And countries that have a D designation means you may get taken. So please do not travel to that country because you're putting yourself at risk. Because individual Americans have a responsibility too, not to go places where they may be picked up, where we have to then find a way to get them returned home. These are very tough, and it takes a whole of government response, whole of the world response to make these deals. We had all of these countries who had to work together all at the same time. Sorry, I'm sort of juggling here. All at the same time to get everybody home. The logistics of doing this is very difficult.
Yeah, and really, you mentioned these personal relationships that have to get built. Just say a brief word about, the importance of that, and maybe even thinking ahead to foreign policy after the election. I mean, we had this wonderful line of Chancellor Schultz saying to President Biden, for you, Joe, I will do this. These relationships seems like this case is illustrative of how much these matter. It's not just about one power versus another, it's that, but it's also about the people who know one another. And you've been in rooms like that. So say a word about that, the way that diplomacy is expressed as a person-to-person reaction when it comes to negotiating like this.
It's incredibly crucial. We saw the president, of course, talking directly to Chancellor Schultz, who said, I will do this for you, Joe, which is really quite amazing. We had Kamala Harris talking with Schultz at the Munich Security Conference, talking with the head of Slovenia as well. We had Secretary Blinken talking to his counterparts in all of this. We have, in fact, very strong relations with intelligence services all over the world because often these detainees, these wrongfully detained Americans, are held by the intelligence services. So the fact that our director of the CIA had a relationship with the FSB in Russia is also crucial because it's often the intelligence channels that you can use when there's no other channel that's available to you. So I give the President Biden, Vice President Harris, Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, everyone, extraordinary credit for creating these relationships, these partnerships. We saw that as we were talking about the Middle East in terms of our relationships with governments all over the world who then can go in and speak with Iran, even if we can't, though we have delivered a message directly to Iran about trying to calibrate any response so that they do not create a wider war. It is critical to engage, even to engage with adversaries, because it's the only way that you can move forward. To give you another example of that in another part of the world, we heard today that China is going to close down some of the precursor chemicals to fentanyl. That has come about because of a dialogue between the United States and China on the scourge of fentanyl and the importance of closing down those precursor routes so that fentanyl does not come into the United States. So all of those hard work of diplomacy really matters, and it is extraordinarily difficult work. And I'm incredibly grateful to the president, vice president, to the cabinet, and to all of my former diplomatic colleagues who work both from Washington and in embassies all over the world to create this network of allies and partners to try to solve the world's most difficult problems.
Yeah, it really is a reminder that nations have interests, but these relationships are extremely crucial. And in the very few seconds we have left, it's a big question, but when you think about how foreign policy plays in elections, usually we think that it doesn't make such a difference. Do you have a feeling that maybe this time this will be more on Americans' minds as they go to polls in November?
Well, I think Americans are most concerned about their day-to-day lives. getting up in the morning, going to work, getting their kids to school, making sure that they can afford the future they want for their children. But part of affording the future of that children is a stable world. And I'm really immensely grateful. Obviously, I'm a Democrat, a political appointee. I believe that Vice President Harris, now Governor Walz, will give us the kind of world that we need. And when things happen, you need to make sure that you have someone who understands how to work with others, how to get people to move forward to peace and stability. And I believe that Vice President Harris, with the experience that she has, Governor Walz, with his own experience, including his own time in China and understanding the importance of human rights and China, will get us to the right place. I think that's what we need in this world. That'll give us the economy that'll give people the day-to-day lives that they're looking for and deserve.
Great. Well, Ambassador Wendy Sherman, thank you so much for coming on here and joining us and sharing your expertise and your insights on this incredible set of events that we see unfolding. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Shane. Great to be with you all.
And thank you to all of you out there for watching. Go over to WashingtonPostLive.com to get more information about our upcoming programs and a free subscription as well. I'm Shane Harris from the Washington Post. Thanks very much for joining us.